We're going to have a chat today about the gain pedal market. And full pun intended, is it oversaturated? I think a lot of folks, including myself, would say maybe it is. Maybe it's getting there. Maybe not. But we're here to talk about all things gain pedals, specifically what makes them so cool, and diving into some of the circuitry aspect and a lot of things that I'm really looking forward to talking about with Alex because he is a genius and a mastermind behind a lot of these great creations. And with that, Alex, would you like to give everybody just a quick 30-second overview, and then we'll hop into the discussion?
Sure, yeah. Thanks so much, Dave. Appreciate you having us here for this. So, I'm Alex. I am the main designer here for CopperSound Pedals. I handle the circuit board, manufacturing, the design, the breadboarding aspect, all that type of stuff. We make pretty much everything here in Massachusetts by hand. We have a very eclectic collection of both more standard streamlined stuff and kind of out there, more exotic items. There's a chance if people know us, they know us from either the Telegraph, the Jack White collaboration with the Triplegraph, or maybe even you've had that somebody send you a picture where it's like, oh, that looks like my Strat, but it's a pedal. Those would generally be how people find us for the most part. Um, and we just love getting to be creative and do like our passion essentially, and blend art and music is really where we strive with like an artistic side and an engineering side, and not too much of one or the other.
That's awesome. Well, and too, I've heard a lot of people say the exact same thing, which is, hey, are those the guys that make the pedals that look like the guitars? But I even brought some show and tell. So if you're not familiar, that is the Strategy, which looks just like a Strat. And this is in a beautiful Lake Placid blue. You guys do custom colors on all these too, right? Like you can pretty much pick from a big palette, relicings, things like that.
Yeah, so we've got a good collection of like drop down, like very common ones. And we also offer, I just did one for a customer where he sent me his new Telly they got in Fiesta Red with like a certain guard color and whatnot. And as long as like it's a capabilities to match it, we have some stipulations. But generally speaking, like we'll do custom drop down options, most of like classic Fender finishes. And it's really fun to like get to take somebody's guitar and put it on their board,
Yeah,
you know.
that's fun.
And that is definitely something kind of like on the topic of today's discussion with the gain over saturation market. Like those are items that have helped us stand out for the last 10 years, um, because it's a unique approach to this world.
100%. Well, with that, man, let's hop into the first general question. And I want to start really broadly here. But, in general, what, why are guitar players so obsessed with gain pedals and what makes them a staple? Like, what are your thoughts? In general, would you agree that that is the largest category in pedals, is the gain pedal?
I would say so. And part of like my big breakdown that I was working on in the background kind of addresses a lot of those things that you're asking, Dave, with like, I guess the first thing at the top of it is it's exciting. That's the thing that attracts so many people to this music, whether it's metal, rock, even pop, any of that type of stuff. Like there's an instant tangibility behind it and it's exciting. It's kind of, it lives in the opposite camp of like utility, things that you need that help a function. Whereas this is out of the box fun and it's inspiring. So those things are very palpable. Um, there's also an aspect here that helps the gain market. Like in my defense, in my article here, so to speak, is like it can never stop or it won't ever stop because one of the key factors is yes, it is such a large body. Like if you had the pyramid, gain is at the bottom in both entrance level to manufacturing and design and amount of them that people will desire. It's not uncommon to see somebody have both a boost, a couple dirts, and a fuzz on their board, but it might be far less common to see somebody with three reverb pedals or three modulation things. So there's also different flavors. If you've got cover bands, they're oftentimes trying to do like a 80s metal or hair metal or something like that, but also having to do like a 90s pop. Then they might have to do something else. So they need like a wide span. So they're another group of outfits that are reinforcing the multiple things. So that's like, I think, a big category. A lot of people, and they're just fun. It comes back to that. It's like, it sounds like a lot of the records I've heard, or it gives them a different experience, and those things are instantly tangible. I think that's a big thing that helps them. There's also that joke formula, like the perfect amount of like gear is the mount I have plus one. So like I got to get the newest thing. So I think there's also several other factors too that we can get into for why like I don't think you'll see it stopping.
Yeah. Well, and guilty is charged, man. I've trimmed my pedal board down quite a bit lately, but previously I had a really large board. I had an ES8, Boss looper, and I literally think that half of my loops were just drive pedals, right? And I even had them in groups like, bank one is like overdrives, two is fuzzes, etc. And I agree. I mean, you don't see people doing that necessarily. I mean, outside of like shoegaze, it might be more common to have multiple reverb pedals, delay pedals, etc. But gain is really the basis of which everyone builds off of. So I think that does make it a lot of fun. What I'd like to move into here too, James, because there may be some people here that, kind of might need an even more basic entry level review. A lot of different gain pedal types out there. I mean, you've got boost, you've got overdrive, you've got distortion, you've got fuzz. Can you maybe just break down for us sort of your thoughts on each and what each brings to the table in terms of an application?
Sure. Yeah, the separate categories. So it's good that you kind of itemize that from low to high, going like, your different boosters, your different drives, distortions, fuzzes. They're all kind of in their own category. And inside of them, there's like subcategories of that. Um, so um like that's another thing that draws people to having multiple of gain types to it. Um, but there's there's different types of circuits that inherently are going to be what I've called like timeless classics and stuff that transcends generation. The first drive pedal I got was a TS9. That's a classic one for a lot of people. And inside of those, you're going to get different breakdowns of different boost pedals, which attract different people. Like you're going to get FET boosts, which might have a little bit of an amp grittiness. You're going to get op amp boosts like we do with Gravity Bomb, that is more of like your neutral, just make you louder. For gain pedals, there's a lot of people that like an always on. And going back to the first question, Dave, it's like, why are there so many? Some people like that's just their core sound. Like, okay, I got to go play a gig, but I can only grab a couple things. I'm going to grab this thing that is my sound that I'm used to, how it reacts. I'm familiar with it. So inside of the like that gain category for overdrive, you get a lot of categories of your screamer styles, your centaur styles, Bluesbreaker style is very popular, rat, a lot of those like classic topologies that aren't really going anywhere. They're, the building blocks for everything. You get into distortions as well. I feel like Boss really put most things on the map in general, but with like the tangibility of like, or the accessibility, I should say, of like the DS1 with like getting like a more higher saturation thing that's accessible to everybody's wallet. That was a big thing there, you know. Um, Again, I think Rat is more in that distortion world. Um, with our modern stuff, not kind of going on the opposite spectrum of like the classics, there's so much great stuff coming out for the modern high gain player from an amplifier and pedal standpoint, like working with the amplifier or having your own standalone. You're seeing a lot of companies go after that high gain world, which is a very hard world to get because you got to get past like distortion, but you can't get into fuzz. So that's an interesting slice of the market. And then the last one is fuzz, which some people swear by, they live by. Like that is one of the extra fun ones because sometimes you get ones like our Renegade pedal, right, where it's got like that sizzle, like we joke about it like that cooked bacon or like the Jacob's ladder or like sizzle vibe. You get those. You get some straightforward ones that are a little bit more um, palpable, that are almost akin to drive pedals, and like inside of them you've got different like germanium stuff. You've got people that do point to point, like, so in each category of gain there's then subcategories in the way that people approach them. If they're doing modern, if they're doing old school biasing, if a lot of us, like, this world, a lot of it lives in like stuff that was done in the 60s and 70s, and we're trying to expand and create upon that while so living in an homage and being attracted to what people liked in the first place or what they heard on a record. Because going back to my first topic about like transcending like generations, like you're still going to get so many of those classic albums from 30, 40, 50 years ago that are doing that, and people are trying to, you know, achieve that sound as well. So it drives them again to hear the the gain aspect and really solidifies that being a staple of people's sounds.
Yeah. Well, and you touched on a lot of things in there that I think are important when you're breaking down those categories, which is how are the circuits designed? Because that's so
Mhm.
much influence, right? And the interesting thing you brought up Fuzz, and I really feel that Fuzz is like its own world, and you may agree or disagree, but it's like the ultimate like the same people that are really into craft brew or like craft coffee, cork sniffing. I mean, there's like a million varieties of Fuzz, but what's so interesting to me, the dichotomy is that they are some of the most simple circuits. Like if you've ever opened a fuzz face and looked at how few components actually go into making that device, I just find it really interesting. And I'm not a huge fuzz guy. Like I tend to live more in the overdrive world. That's really kind of where I'm at. But fuzz is just so interesting that you can get so many different varieties. So let's hop into that one specifically and talk a little bit about fuzz, like in terms of circuit design and kind of what makes it what. You talked about the Renegade, which you guys have, which is a little bit more of that sort of edgy kind of grind. But maybe break some thoughts down for us in terms of how you guys approach design, like in fuzz pedals, and what makes them all so different.
Sure, yeah. So I'm kind of like you, Dave. I'm not super into the fuzz world as a player. It makes me play different, which I appreciate and like. It's not really a sound that I go towards. However, when you're approaching it, there's so many different worlds of it, which is nice. So there's something you can carve out. Um, to echo what you were saying about the part count for fuzz pedals and boost pedals, like it's kind of like a recipe. The less stuff you have, the more important each piece is.
Mm.
So when you change something like a biasing or the way a filter is done or the way gain staging is done, so many of those things matter so much. They're so crucial and important because fuzz is often a very, I think of it sometimes as a very volatile state where it's like under biased, it's over biased, it doesn't give me that seasoning that I wanted. But changing something like that can really change the flavor and the vibe. And going back to what you were saying about Renegade is like that has kind of like a different feel than like a traditional like middle of the road fuzz a lot of times. However, the topology is still based on fuzz face.
Mm.
So the way that we biased it and did those tweaks internally, that was actually, it shows like you can take these like 11 components and really make them different and really, you could make a brand off changing fuzz. You could do a Devi Ever type thing and make a brand off flipping transistors and stuff in those flavors. Um, I do want to touch base, I guess, on a little bit of the origin of that. When I started, I made a fuzz pedal for Jordan here that I think I made something wrong or something broke, and it had that sizzle at the end that took me like half a decade to finally come back to and achieve that right voltage, right sputteriness, and everything. And that's what Renegade ended up becoming. And actually, to elongate on that too, fuzz is definitely like a passion thing for a lot of builders and collectors. You get a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, I got this one from this builder because he does this thing with these cool old school parts, or he does this thing with like a biasing on it that's like you don't see before, it does this. So those in that like category we call fuzz, like there's so many avenues to go and people are obsessive with it. It's almost like trading cards sometimes for people because you could build a brand off it, and I would actually cite here Mike from Analog Man, where it's like you can drop in like an RCA transistor or an NKT or some type of red dot or some type of black glass or something like that. And like literally like that is like, choosing your own adventure there for the fuzz. So there's so many flavors of it. And because you can tune it so well, there are some people out there that like make great point to point stuff that's just like so perfectly like voltage tuned and they're like specific. It's like, don't use a battery, don't use this power, don't use that. Like, make sure you're doing this because it's like going back to what I said, it almost feels like unstable or volatile. Like,
Yeah.
anything in the wrong way is going to do this. And if it's germanium, it's going to bias this way. And we're going to have leakage and stuff like that. And it's almost like everybody's trying to like craft that perfect thing, even though we're always using these imperfect parts. So it's a
That's
really interesting thing.
and that's what I think is so unique about it, man, is that a lot, like to your point about the Renegade, hey, I did something wrong essentially from the textbook, but yet it resulted in this really amazing thing. And I think that is the world that fuzz lives in, is that in a lot of cases, like it's designed to do things that it shouldn't do. Like when you get something biased really low and it spits and sputters, like that was never the intended design, but some people really dig that. Um, it's really interesting too, like getting to see a lot of different fuzz builders like through our program. Like I'll give a shout out to Voltec Electronic Devices, a company out of Maryland. Um, they have made some of the best fuzzes I've touched lately. And again, coming back to your point of like point to point hand wired, really tight specs and can almost be as good of like an overdrive pedal, like really, really low gain, which is not something I would typically see at a fuzz, but it's just amazing what can be done. Um, you know, there's so many stories out there about like, Eric Johnson, these rumors that he could tell the difference between like a Duracell 9 volt or an Energizer, or like guys that would
Really
put them in the
non-
freezer before they would record just to get, the temperature would change, the operating range and all of that stuff. So what are your thoughts on all the like the crazy hype? Like, is it real? Is it just BS? Give us your take on it, man.
Um, okay, so yeah, it's interesting that was one of like the categories of my like breakdown when I was doing this before we started. Quick we were talking about Eric Johnson. Is that who we were
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about?
Well, I just mentioned the batteries, right?
Yeah,
Like everyone said that he
yeah.
could tell the
Well,
difference in Duracell.
yeah, yeah, which I've heard a lot of stories similar to that. I think a lot of the things with the hype is around the newest thing. There's always an attraction to what's next, what's new, what's the newest thing, right? Um, and I think what's new often comes in like two main categories, which would be like a standard format or something never before seen. And I had talked about at the outset of this, like, our telegraph and triplegraph, but to keep it in the gain world, to talk about those hype, what's the new thing? A standard form factor that I would cite that had a lot of hype recently that people gravitate to and love is what Matthew Hoops did with the DRV from 1981. That's a
Yeah.
pedal that, like in the gain world, I'd call more standard, and people were gravitating to it. And in my opinion, he made a rat sound good. Like I don't generally care for the rat too much, but I think he did a really good job. There's obviously a lot of fame around that, so that helps the hype. But that's an example of like something that like it was hard to not see for a long time. People love that hype, and hype usually comes also with a connotation of like it's not meeting the expectations, but in my opinion, that one did actually, you know.
Mm.
And then on the opposite spectrum for hype, it's more of like what's the new thing never before seen. And keep it in the gain world, I cited the Chase Bliss and Benson Preamp MK2, their autonomatone thing with like the automatic faders and everything. So those are two examples of like your more tried and true form factor in a whoa, we've never really seen this before. And both things were hyped different categories, different reasons, but like they were both living in that world of hype. And I think it really does come down to that whole like there's a bit of also a psychology thing there of like both one, the new thing is fun because I want to see what's up with that new thing. And
Hmm.
and my buddy has it and whatnot. Maybe there's a bit of a fear of missing out thing. But also the other thing too is just like it's just fun to see a new thing. It goes
Yeah.
back to that on like the thing I talked at the beginning of like these are just fun. And you know what too? I think there's sometimes a psychology thing there of like somebody's like, it's just not doing it for me necessarily, and maybe this one will do it. And there's
Mhm.
also it's one of the points, I won't get too far into it, but one of the points that I did when I was writing this up too is like the the risk factor is so much lower when it comes to like a boost or a drive pedal if it's a more affordable thing. Whereas like you get a reverb space station or like a really expensive like compressor or a chorus or whatever, it's a higher ticket to entry. So when you get a booster for like $80, there's so much lower worry. There's an inherent value and you're gonna be more confident in it because it's like, okay, well, there was not that much. I could sell it if I want. I didn't have to drop $400. You know what I mean? Like the
Mhm.
risk factor is so much lower with getting, my buddy said check out the EP booster, but he also said check out the Big Sky. I think I'm gonna try this one knob guy for like a hundred
Yeah.
bucks, you know what I mean, versus the space station and MIDI. So that accessibility also adds some weight to the purchasing opinion of the purchaser, or
Yeah.
helps their judgment.
Well, and I think coming back to hype, a lot of this, and we see this being in the industry, a lot of it is sort of the industry marketing machine where, to your point, it's either a really great reimagination of some classic circuit, which I would argue, I feel like we're getting to the end of that, right? Like, I just don't know how many times you can remake a tube screamer or remake a rat or remake a fuzz face. I love to see innovation around folks like Chase Bliss, who are doing things like the automaton, where we're able to do things with gain pedals that we never could before. Now we can automate them with MIDI, things of that nature, which I think the DRV MIDI capable. I can't remember if 1981 included that. I know like the Jackson Audio stuff, I think a lot of it is MIDI capable. But I think it's interesting to see how that evolves and the hype goes behind it. So I want to take a break here because we've been talking a bit. So number one, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat or raise your hand. I'm also going to launch a poll really quick, and I'd love everybody to vote, which is, do you think that the gain pedal market is oversaturated? Yes or no? Your team like, hey, I can't take it anymore, or no, I need 1,000 more options because it's a never-ending tone quest. Would love to see what everybody's reaction is here to this. But in the meantime, any questions from anybody in the audience? And it doesn't necessarily have to be like what we've talked about. We can throw Alex any curveballs here as well. So feel free to use the chat if you've got any questions there. And man, this is pretty impressive on this poll. Not necessarily what I expected. This is pretty cool. All right, so far, just got to change. So somebody finally said, yes, it is oversaturated, but the overwhelming majority so far, 83% of everyone that's voting says, no, I need more gain pedals, which I think is really interesting. And I think, from my personal opinion, you catch me on a certain time of day, I would go either way. I see it a lot because we're in the industry. So in some cases, I'm like, oh my God, does anyone need another drive pedal? But yet I constantly find myself wanting new things or trying new things. So I don't know. I agree that that we may have a long way to go, particularly back to my earlier comment where suppliers and manufacturers are pushing more of the innovation. So
yeah, I think I've seen that too. And I actually wanted to push back on something that you were saying, Dave, too, about like maybe we're feeling like we're at the end of an era of the classics being reimagined over and over. And the reason that I could see like I would push back on that is from a couple factors. The first one I'm going to call brand loyalty. The second one I'm going to call tweaks that appeal. And the first one is, let's go to the tweaks that appeal. And what I did was I outlined here, essentially, people get attracted to major and minor tweaks of stuff. And I'm going to use the Tube Screamer here as an example. And again, these are done back in the day, so it might still be to your point that it could be drying up. But what I wanted to do for a minor tweak that people gravitated towards is when Voodoo Labs did the Sparkle Drive. That was a Tube Screamer with a clean blend, and that was it. And that attracted so many people and kind of opened the door to clean blend. Barber really opened the door when it came to clean blend on a compressor, but for on a Tube Screamer, they really opened the door. And then on the inverse, years and years ago, Jamie Stillman from Earthquaker was so tired of answering people's questions of which one is your Tube Screamer, he made the EQD Palisades, which is 7 knobs, 2 toggles, 3 foot switches. Because he was like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it my way. And there was a Tube Screamer again. Again, I don't want to, water it down to just saying the word like it was just that. But he did it the way he wanted to, and people gravitated. They loved it. He now makes the plumes for $100, and people love it. That's a Tube Screamer as well. So, but also just doubling down on that too, there's a brand loyalty thing that I think helps the position against your comment, Dave, too, about like, is it drying up? Are we done seeing it? And I think I myself have found to be in a similar position when I was on the purchaser side more than on the manufacturer side. So I think I appreciate it as a manufacturer. But when people get into a brand, they like it. They like what the brand has, what it offers. You're often going to be very susceptible to wanting to see what else they offer. Or if you're in the market for something else in a different like category, you might go to them first because you really liked that pedal. You know what I mean? So there's a loyalty thing there where it's like, Okay, I love these two gain pedals from this company. I do need like this like phase or a flanger or a modulation or a compressor. Do they make that? Because I really like what they do, or I want to support them as a brand and
Yeah.
identity. I'm going to essentially add into their brand equity, and like I'm going to go there first. So I think that helps. So if I would again, I guess I would make like the statement kind of like if brand X comes out with model of a rat or whatever it is for Y, a person is going to often be drawn, the person being Z here, to buy that because I wanted a rat. This brand I really like just came out with one. I want to see what theirs is all about.
Yeah. Well, I come back to our previous conversation about hype. Look at Chase Bliss, right? Like I feel like coming back to brand loyalty, release after release after release, they keep hitting home runs. They keep having their cohort come back to them. I literally think they can make a pedal that sounds like a rat farting in space with a bunch of knobs and dip switches, and it would sell out in 10 minutes, right? It's just that brand loyalty has become so strong. So I totally agree with you there. Natalie, I saw you had your hand up. Did we have a question that came in? Um,
So not so much a question, but a comment, which maybe everyone's got some things to say about it. So Cosmodio is changing the game with game pedals. I want to see more innovation like that. That was a comment from Ben. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I would love to hear your take, Alex. Actually, I don't know Cosmodio, so I would love to be educated. What are they doing that is so cool?
So Cosmodio, I'm going to get refamiliarize myself with them. They're a brand actually that is here in Massachusetts as well, and we've done trade shows alongside them. We've done small pop-ups with them, and those guys are very smart, and their stuff is very approachable too. Because I think going on the Chase Bliss, not to throw too much shade, so their stuff isn't approachable for a lot of people. I think it's
Agreed.
very
Excellent.
it's very left brain people. It's very like if you're going to use it, and some people might not use it, but they still like the thing. That's fine. Um, Cosmodio have got a couple pedals on the market. So they got the Glitch Witch, the Gravity Well, and the Pet Yeti, right? And so their approach to gain is really cool in that from a form factor standpoint, I think they do something that is a little bit different than a lot of people, which is really nice. And I think carving out an identity there is sometimes half the battle. Again, going back to the Chase Bliss as an example. But these guys are the type of people too where you at on the surface level is very approachable, but then from an internal standpoint, they're very smart from like construction for their circuit and whatnot and how their stuff works. But again, they're still very approachable, which I think is really it's weird to say is almost like as important as how good it sounds is like are people confused? So they do a really good job of blending similar to us of like knob and feature set without like getting complicated. Um, and again, I am newer to their world, and I've talked to them more than I've probably played their stuff, which I don't know if is an insult to them or whatnot. It's just I like talking to those guys. But the way that they do some of their controls is something that, like with their filtering, a lot of their type of I'm thinking it was the Glitch Witch. Let me just touch on that for a sec because if you guys want to look it up, it's Cosmodio.
Mhm.
Cosmo and audio, almost like a portmanteau of that. Um, so their Glitch Witch is like a CMOS fuzz, but also has a frequency dividers that are active and all rhythmic effects and modulation rates are locked in subsonic divisions. Like they do a lot of stuff like on paper where it's like, okay, I'm not sure what's going on here, but that's where it comes down to just really playing their thing and getting attracted to it. And I actually think there's something more so than the topic that Ben pointed out. Something that is even, I think, possibly more important than it is just how the user experience is. And a lot of people are actually to go with your point, Dave, about the whole is it drying up? Are we tired of seeing those clones and derivatives? Like there's a palpable want and need for like just something that is different. I often categorize it as the reaction to the hype type thing instead of the hype machine being like, oh, this new three knob overdrive. the way these guys are doing it, you might not understand, and that might not be as important to you as much as it draws you in of like when somebody explains like, oh, well, when you do this, it latches onto what you're listening to and now creates this cacophony here, and you're like, oh, I haven't seen that before, and there's a lot of value added points there just alone. Um, from an aesthetic point of view, if I can continue that and to keep it in game pedals and also talk about what we do with our pickguard stuff, like treble boosters aren't new at all. The way that Broadway looks, people haven't seen before. And that aspect of it gains their attention and respect. It's been so often at like trade shows, whether large or small scale, we used to play a game where we would watch people go by the booth and they would like get a glance out of the corner of their eye of something, and as they're walking, they would like stop the conversation with their buddy, take a step back, and they'd have to like come over and like touch the telegraph or like see what that is because they're used to seeing a rectangle with circles on it, right? So whether you've got somebody like Cosmodio doing like really cool internal stuff that ends up translating in your speakers, or somebody like us that does a lot of stuff aesthetically that catches them, and then the sound is good enough to reinforce them, those things, there's an aspect of both. You know, I would, without going too far on like a tangent, I had even years ago said like if people getting into the market now, like what would you suggest? I often say you got to stand out internally or externally, if not both. So you could have a basic thing, but it's like, oh man, the functionality here is really cool and they're doing something I've never seen. Okay, they're doing some classics, but this aesthetic is just so cool that people do shop with their eye and it draws them in first, and then they can solidify as long as it sounds good. And to be honest, for the most part, I'm almost safe to grant they all sound good because people bring it to the finish line as a product. And again, you go the philosophical route of like, not everything is for everybody, and I agree with that, but like, there's a chance this has been tested. People really love it. They're still going to see it first online. They're going to see it on a phone or on a YouTube thing. And I've often made this analogy, you know, where like you got to have the outside have that presence to draw them in before they fall in love with the sound. They're falling in love with it aesthetically. And I've always made this like analogy of like, I don't see somebody driving by a house that's dilapidated, run down, and unkempt and go, I wonder if the kitchen's really cool, you know, because they're seeing it on the core level first before at the street
Yeah.
view, you know, the
Yeah.
curb appeal, if you will, of pedals kind of has to be there too. And everything that actually going on the idea of the topic with, is it oversaturated from an aesthetic point of view? There's such a wide scope of what people are drawn into, you know, somebody's least favorite movie is somebody else's favorite movie, that type of ideology.
Well, yeah, 100%. And so what I like about where we're going now is really you can talk all day about the nerdy details. And I think a lot of people, you know, if you use utility theory, everyone would say, oh, well, you know, what's the best sound? And sound has to be rated on a 1 to 100 scale. And what's that going to cost relative to, you know, my money outlay? But what we know is that no one makes decisions based totally on utility. It's emotion. It's how does it make me feel? It's how does this inspire me? And that's one of the reasons too. You brought up Broadway, and I'll just show that really quick as a show and tell. If you've never seen CopperSound's Broadway pedal, it looks just like a Telecaster. Like you cut a chunk out of it. This one's in a beautiful seafoam green. But you know, I cannot tell you how many people ask me about these just because of the look. And it's like, you know, hey, listen, I love it. It's a great sounding treble booster, but it's treble booster, right? But the aesthetic of it gets people excited, and it makes you feel a part of something, right? Like if you're a huge Telecaster fan or Stratcaster fan for the strategy, you know, maybe that does the thing. I would also say, like coming back to brands like Chase Bliss, again, I think the reason that they have done such a good job of carving out this unique niche is that they are so different. And that when you use their products, you feel different, you sound different, and you create different. And so I'd love to just go further into that, man, because I feel like, you know, at the end of the day, the means to the end of any of this gear is, can I make something that means something to me and to other people? And when we think about overdrive pedals, again, it's a hell of a lot more than what kind of diodes are in it, or, you know, is it an op amp or is it transistor based, whatever. What are your thoughts about that in terms of the category as a whole? Like what makes people feel stuff?
It really is like emotions are what people gravitate to and connect with a lot of the stuff. And yeah, to go on the Broadway, like we could have done a toggle and a knob in a enclosure and called it a day. And I don't know if it would have had the attraction like it does. And I sometimes refer to it as like a business card. You know, people see it and that gets them in the door and they know about us. Emotion definitely plays a big part of it. You know, I'm sure you've seen stuff like people will buy something if it's like blacked out, like a matte black type of finish.
Yep.
So there's that type of emotion. There's also an immediacy in the gain world that, you know, I'm trying to put my brain back on of like when we do small conventions and big conventions, when we're engaging with potential customers at shows and we've got like a large board and people are playing, you know, when they turn something on, a lot of times there's an instance of like, oh, whoa, that's cool. You know, especially if it's something that's a little out there, you know, like I said, Renegade with its sizzle on it, or just in general, something that maybe they haven't heard before because maybe they haven't experienced in their own setup a truly like transparent, um, equal, like filtering style thing. Like with our Foxcatcher, people gravitate towards Foxcatcher because it's not like the Centaur or the TS9. It's not a mid boosted pedal. It's literally just flat EQ with gain and some sweetness. So people gravitate towards those type of things. Or again, if it's like an out there thing, it's very like instantly tangible. And those emotions, it causes them to maybe play differently, or in general, a lot of times people will like at a convention, they're going to play stuff that they've been writing. Maybe it's something that they've just been working on in their band or whatnot, and they're going to play through it to see if that would work on that part, or hey, this could be a really cool thing to help out what I'm doing, or just in general, I really it's weird. Like it is an emotional connection and response to a lot of these things. Um, and like I said, sometimes the thing that gets people over to our booth is just the fact that we got stuff that looks like nobody else's.
Yep.
So they were attracted to that. So really, a lot of it is attraction, and these are things that we don't choose. You know what I mean? Like you can't choose what you're attracted to and what you're not. Um, and these people will come over for it just solely because of how it looks. Then you you talk to them, you rope them in with like the feeling that it conveys and the sound that it produces for them. So I think you kind of, you kind of answered it in the question too about the emotional attachment, Dave, like in the emotional state that people feel with it. Because kind of all it is, all of these are like emotions of like, oh, I'd like to see more of this with the innovation, or like, oh, I'd love to see so and so do their take on this classic thing and whatnot. And like, just because you're excited about it and it's an emotional response to it.
Well, Ben made a great comment here in the chat. He said, I'll fall in love with any pedal if it makes me play something that I would normally never create otherwise. And super well said, man. And I fall in that category as well. I love trying things that makes me feel different, especially to get out of a rut. Especially if you're working on recording something or writing parts and you just kind of always go back to the same stuff and everything kind of ends up sounding the same, but then you inject a different piece of gear that makes you think differently, makes you play differently. Like Johnny Marr, I've heard talk so many times about like the reason he plays a jazz master and Jaguar and offset guitars is because it makes him play differently. Like when he picks it up, he doesn't want to play a blues riff. He wants to play different things. And I think a lot of that is very true. And I think we all look for that in our pedals. And as artists, we always want something to inspire us. And I do think that's one of the reasons that the gain pedal market and the pedal market in general will continue to go on in perpetuity, is that we as artists always want something to make us feel and something different. And, the fun thing about that keeps going. Yeah, go, man.
And to go on that, like that's something like you could find something like Ben was stating about like something that just makes you play differently or invokes a different feeling and like you approach it differently. I find that oftentimes with Fuzz because I don't normally play that, or delay pedals and stuff like that, right? But there's a good chance that that person finds that thing, they snag it because it's kind of cool, different. Maybe I could use it out there, this would be perfect for that bridge of that song or that different thing that I've been looking for. And that's going to live and coexist next to two others of that person's staple, classic, tried and trues. So now in this example, I got 3 dirt pedals. They got that kind of out there. I just need to sound like me to cover all these things, and then maybe some type of like boost or a different thing. So it's not gonna wipe away everything. It's gonna live like, it's gonna have like this symbiotic relationship with everything and just coexist on that person's board in this hypothetical. That's
Yeah,
why they have 3 of them, 4 of them.
totally agree. And some things you may only use for certain situations, like you may only use a fuzz when you're playing lead or whatever. And like when I turn on a fuzz, like immediately it's like 90s grunge rock. I'm playing Dinosaur Jr. or Smashing Pumpkins, something like that. And that's not, usually what I always get into, but it's nice to have the tools in the toolkit. Let's take another break real quick as well. And I just would love to hear if anyone else has any other questions or thoughts. Are there certain topics that you want to get into with Alex here? Would love to hear your guys' input. I'll throw another quiz out here as well. And this one, super, super basic. What is your favorite gain pedal category? Is it boost? Is it overdrive? Is it distortion? Is it fuzz? This one I think is going to be fun to see the responses on. And cool. Yep. Already coming in on, man, you guys are quick. Looks like overdrive is taking the lead. Took a step back. Now it's in the lead again. Boost, fuzz. Okay. So overall, looks like overdrive is half the folks have said overdrive is the most favorite. And then everything else is kind of tied at like 17%, like between boost, distortion, and fuzz. Honestly, that's a little surprising to me. I thought fuzz would have been a little bit longer, again, just because of the market and how many people we see that really get into that category. But overdrive is your classic, so not overly surprising. So I'll end the poll. I'll share the results here with everyone. Any other questions? I would love to hear something from you guys, man.
Don't be shy. I'll just keep talking.
Right on. I think Peter's got a question. I see the finger going up there. We can type something out here.
I'd just be curious, beyond Sonics, do you actually see the market becoming almost like a collector's market? I've got to have one of these because it's part of the range, either of a particular builder, or I've got to have as many flavors of fuzz as I can possibly get my hands on, almost like comic collecting. As a builder, as a company, do you see that as part of the landscape these days?
Great question, Peter.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think so. Because these are just like anybody else that has like a hobby. There's, outside of like a marketing thing, there is still like this collectability that people really enjoy. Whether you're a studio guy that's practically using them all the time, or a person that's just an avid lover and collector, because we're keeping it in the gain world, there's so many flavors. People go to different bands, they do different projects to get inspired differently. These are like their colors and their tools, just like an artist would have. And there's I didn't get into this in our topic here, but there's an inherent thing in the world that we've seen really doubled down on in the last 5 years, if not more, of limited edition stuff, unique colorways, all that type of stuff that people love, and they're going to get it just because it's like this color or this style or whatnot. Limited runs really help because it is, like you said, there's a collectability there. It's cool. Like we did in November to celebrate 10 years, we did this all germanium fuzz pedal called Mystique. And we only did 50 of them, and a lot of people really have like a connection and gravitate towards being like, okay, well, there was only 50 of them. I like this company. I like what they're doing. It's a cool milestone. It sounds good. I've been wanting a fuzz. Let's try this out. It's cool that it's like a historic piece. It's kind of like a little slice of the history, and people gravitate towards that. And it kind of does come back to, like you're saying, Peter, like a collectability. It's people collect stuff all the time. There's collectors of, whether it's a movie poster, maybe it's like, Beanie Babies, G.I. Joes, any type of like action figure things. those type of things. People collect them, and why not for us, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think, you look at folks like Josh Scott, who really sort of brought that even more to the masses. And, I remember all the way back to him, and show my age here, but like going to pawn shops with my dad in the 90s, and we would find things, whether it was records or guitar gear or whatever. It was like, man, this is super cool. This has this, sort of underground, legacy or collectability. Like I've got an old Japanese Strat that I bought in a pawn shop. I think I paid like $50 for it. It had a cigarette lighter stuck up underneath the bridge because it had that weird System 1 tremolo that Fender did with Kaler during that late 80s period. But it's become a collector piece and a sort of a niche item, and I found it, sort of under the radar. But I think as YouTube grew and as communities and social grew, that's where that ignited like wildfire, because now people are talking about it on a more macro scale. What used to be, hey, don't say it too loud, we got to whisper because nobody needs to know about this cool thing. Now everybody does. So I would love to let that lead into our next question here, Alex, which is just how do you see community and culture and Reddit and all the things online like playing into this world of pedals we live in, and how things like the gain pedal market continue to expand?
The community of our world, so the music industry is a pretty small aspect of like the consumer markets for people, and like the guitar in that musical aspect is even smaller, and pedals is even smaller than that. So there's inherently a camaraderie in here, kind of like how, nations, like here, our nation is made up of states, which is made up of counties, which is made up of like towns, and then is made up of communities in that town, right? So the pedal world is such a friendly world, and I've written articles about this where it's like collaboration over competition. So that type of like ecosystem is very welcoming for a lot of people, which I think, going back to like your emotional discussion, like people gravitate towards brands, identities, makers and shakers and movers like your Josh Scotts, maybe like a Brian Walper. He's well known for a lot of his DIY stuff. We also have DIY as well for that type of community. But to keep it on like the gain discussion for it, this world is very welcoming for people, which is nice. The community, for the most part, is like very encouraging. I don't know, like, if necessarily you were talking prior, Dave, about kind of like a gatekeeping aspect, and I don't know if that's really like in our culture anymore. I think this community also gravitates, like probably most communities are, with a storytelling aspect that they really appreciate. When you see somebody, like you were talking about that thing with like what the late 80s trem system and whatnot, and like you still know that and you perpetuate that. And it's part of the thing of that identity about your experience, your musical journey. And you have to usually share those, otherwise they die, you know? Um, that's where stuff continues to live on. And people really enjoy discussing that type of thing of like, oh yeah, this manufacturer like did this for this small batch. They only had this many they could do, but they made the circuit board wrong, but it did this cool thing. And then now that's become like it transcends. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's become like part of this ecosystem and whatnot. And people really, there is still not necessarily gatekeeping, but people do like being a part of that club of like, oh, I got one of those. Or like I was one of the ones that got like the limited edition blackout series of that. You know what I mean? And manufacturers wouldn't keep doing it if it didn't work, from a business side of standpoint, which is almost the opposite side of like an emotional and artistic standpoint. From a business side, people will often make decisions based on those things, but it's still an outlet for us to be creative. And the community itself is generally pretty positive. You're always going to go to places I usually call Reddit. I call it Dreadit because like almost it's just a cesspool a lot of times for stuff like that. And there's always going to be people that are negative and old mentality and outdated ideologies and that type of stuff that it's usually best to not entertain those people. But overall, I'd say the community's pretty positive, which I really enjoy, and it's a very welcoming place. So that community and network encourages, I think, people to stay here and be part of it and be engaging with it. And because we're such a small group of a small thing, of a small industry, people really like seeing and relating to people. You know what I mean? Like, you watch something like Mythbusters because you like Adam and Jamie. You like watching them. You know, you like watch JHS show because you like to see those people and those brands and like hear their stories, and you have a connection with those people. You know, um, that's really, if you're in a world, you generally want to see who's behind it because you have an emotional attachment to it, and you enjoy that. And I think it's made the community a stronger place for the most part, in general, and pretty welcoming, which is a nice thing. It's not a very, there's always going to be people that are, you know, let's say stains in a network or whatnot. And generally speaking, I think having an approachable and like strong community that's welcoming is a good thing because it helps like a diversity aspect and it helps an inclusion thing. And those are, you know, good features to have in like a small community.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, man. And I also love seeing where you can bring together people from lots of different musical genres or backgrounds. You can have metalheads stand right beside, shoegazers and talk about new products that are coming out and overlap. And I think we're seeing that more, whereas it used to be just so, you know, vertically oriented that, people were really judgmental. But now it's opening up. So I think in general, that's a great thing. Well, we're getting close to end of time, so I'm going to do two things. I'm going to put out our final poll here, which looks like I never stopped sharing the first one, so apologize for that. This one is going to be a little bit more sort of, we may create some riffs here. What about digital gain pedal modeling, right? Like that's becoming so prominent now with Helix, with Neural DSP, et cetera. Like, what do you guys think? Do you think that AI is like actually going for the win? Do you think that there's no way anything's ever going to replace analog? And I purposely chose like you have to pick one of two sides. I would sort of say it's actually in between, just my own personal opinion, but I would just be curious. So everybody throw in on that poll if you'd like to answer. Final call for questions from our audience here. If anybody's got something that we want to talk about with Jordan in our final 5 minutes. So we'll put one more call out. This is interesting, Alex. I thought we were going to have like 100% analog fist shaking. Actually, the digital modeling crowd, 67% say that digital modeling is actually really good. The only 33% said that analog has to be king. So I will share these results with everyone now, which was a little shocking to me. What is your take on it, Alex? What do you think about digital modeling for gain?
I don't know if it's necessarily a bias that I have as much as it is an ignorance in that I don't engage with or do any of the modeling side of things. We've got a couple guys here that are like, they love modeling. They're really good at like digital interface stuff and all of those things that I can't really talk to in depth on. And they are really good. I haven't had any experiences with them in general, just because it's never really been my thing, so it doesn't gravitate towards me. I know that it's kind of like Fuzz, how people make it sound good, even though I've never cared about using it or playing it.
Yeah.
I will say that I feel like the gain aspect was one of the hardest things for the digital era to overcome
Early
because,
on. Yes.
yeah, because maybe it was because such a bad taste in like the 80s with multi-effects where it's like, okay, I could get by with that like phaser and reverb, but the distortion sounded awful. And which is weird because you'd think it'd be one of the first things to make, but it wasn't. And another thing that I always say is you'll see a lot of people out there with like an Axifex or some type of digital interface to handle a lot of the stuff like a cab sim, different type of EQ things, maybe some modulations, reverbs, but then they still have their two favorite dirt pedals because that's become their identity. Their identity is that. And maybe they could model it, but they really like those things. Like, that's my sound, and I'm fine with this reverb algorithm and this phaser and EQ filter, but like, I gotta have this thing from that brand. I just know it. I like it. It also makes it feel like I have a bit more of a uniqueness, and I know that you can modify digital stuff to the umpteenth amount to make it more your own thing, but sometimes it feels like, okay, yeah, I do have this digital rig here, but I still have my own flavor that I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like, because you still have got your guitar and your maybe if you have an amp or not, but like you still want your own identity instead of this black box with a screen. And maybe there's something there that people like, that relationship that they have. So it's cool to also see that means that there can be a coexisting world of like, oh, digital modeling, but also just analog old school, you know? Here's the thing too, like I don't think analog's going to go away, because all the stuff the digital is starting with or modeling is the analog stuff,
Is analog.
you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, this thing does a really good job at emulating what that thing used to do, which what that thing did was all analog. And then it did it poorly, so it had its own aspect of a preamp vibe. It had its own, disintegration quality. And now they're trying to take the most pristine thing and mirror the old thing, because oftentimes our ears hear it better with that sweetening aspect to it. There's a reason some people don't like digital delays and they want analog. And, there's a flavor for everybody, which is nice. So I think overall, it's not a world that I have had. I probably have less than 10 minutes experiencing any like digital rigs. And that could be a certain bias out of the gate, but I'm also going to probably stand up and defend that how good digital is for stuff. Like, it does it really well now. It's really good at it. But also at the end of the day, you want to play the thing that is inspiring to you and that you like to play. So if you like to play that digital rig and it makes you play, that's a good product, and that's better. If you want to play your old school things and plug them in, that's good too. I kind of live in a philosophy where people often say like, okay, well, that new pedal or new guitar isn't going to make you better, but I still think there is an aspect to, if the thing inspires you to play, inherently you'll play more, and that will generally mean you are playing better because you're playing more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that could make you. So if it makes you play different, or you enjoy it, or there's an aspect that really relates to you, then that digital interface that I'm not really into, that's a good product still. Like, that's a good thing. And it's really good at it. And it made me write 3 songs last night from doing a couple drop down things and whatnot, and presets and different like captures and like EQ curves that like I would have never, you could say like, oh yeah, you would never be able to do that with analog. You've got a whole full spectrum thing here digitally. But if either one inspires you, it's still good. There's no right or wrong here either, which is also really good. It's all just paint on the canvas.
If it makes you create music, job done. That's my take.
You don't have to. And most people that like the digital stuff, a couple of the guys here love and swear by the digital. They still love playing guitar pedals. They still love doing those things. They still love engaging with them, because that is also another thing too. Like we talk about, like Jordan here will do a ton of stuff in digital stuff, like in that world, but he still loves putting his Triplegraph on manually with his foot, because it makes him play differently than hitting the space bar or adjusting with a mouse. They both have their world and both great at it.
Well, James here in the chat made a point that I fully agree with, which is blending analog and digital is really great. It's all about inspiration. And I think that the future really is going to be hybrid. We were really fortunate. We had Justin Bryant from Two Notes on with us last year. We had an event like this, and we were talking about, a lot of their products and how they are merging digital and analog. And I think that's the future for us, because there's not going to be any one that wins, but whatever inspires you, makes you play music, and, pick up the guitar. That's the ultimate goal. Well, we are at time. Gosh, this has been awesome, man. And I really enjoyed the conversation. Maybe, I know you wrote up some sort of really detailed notes. Maybe we can take that and turn that into a blog. I'd love to let some folks who joined us today have exposure to that. But we really appreciate your time, Alex. I could nerd out on this for another 2 hours, but maybe we'll have a part 2. We are putting together, and this is to be announced, but we're trying to organize sort of a State of Guitar Pedals 2025 roundtable, where we're going to have a lot of really nice big names from the pedal world. We're certainly hoping to have Alex and the guys from CopperSound join us for that. So stay tuned. We are rolling out quite a few other events over the course of this year. If you don't know much about us, BuyOrBorrow Music, we're a membership club that allows you to borrow on demand lots of products like the CopperSound pedal lineup. So if you ever want to try stuff before you buy it, or just get exposure to a lot of things you may have never touched before, give us a look. We started $25 a month, and it's a great way to scratch the pedal itch without going bankrupt. So Alex, again, thank you so much, man. We've got this recorded For anyone who joined, if you want to go back and revisit some parts, we are going to put this on YouTube. We'll send out a link via email with access to the digital on-demand version. And we hope everyone has a fantastic day. Thanks for joining us. See you guys.